Hey, welcome. This is Lee Waller, and I am working in Unreal Engine 5.5's motion design tools. And this motion graphic that you see right now, my reason for creating it was I was wanting to experiment with emissive lights and bloom, and then also see what I could create as far as lens flares go. If you're not in motion design mode, I have a tutorial where I walk through that process. You can jump out of this one, take a look at it, and then come back. I need to make a few adjustments here to my sequencer. So I'm going to drop down here to the frame rate, set that to 30 frames per second. And then I'm going to give myself 10 seconds on this. So I'm going to jump to 300 frames down here in the sequence and then set that at the end. And there we have 10 seconds on our sequence. The first thing that I'm going to work on creating is the floor. And to do that, I need a rectangle. So I'm going to go up here into the 2D shape, click on rectangle, and we'll make some adjustments to this. Make sure it's selected over there in the outliner, and then I'm going to drop down first to mesh size right here and bring that up to 2000 on the X and the Y, and then back up to the location and rotation. On the rotation here, I'm going to set this on the Y axis to a -90, and then I'll drop this down to a -98. So there we have our floor. Now we're going to need to build a material for this, and I am going to jump out of Unreal Engine and go take a look at a website called polyhaven.com to grab the textures we need to create the floor that I want. So polyhaven.com is a great resource. All of this content here is free, so take a look at it and take a look at giving them some support on that. I'm going to drop down into textures and browse the textures. And I'm looking for a wood floor, so I'm going to click right here on wood. Now, the one that I've used in the tutorial is actually this one right here at the top. You may need to search for it, but it's this wood floor by Dimitrios Sava. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to click on these three bars right here. So I'm going to select the pieces I need to download. I don't need the ambient occlusion or the ambient occlusion with the roughness and the metal. I will download the diffuse. And I'll deselect the normal DX, but leave the normal GL, and then I'll leave the roughness also. So those are the textures that I'm going to download. Once I've selected those, I'm going to come back up here and click on download. And then we'll just need to save them in a location that you'll know where they are. So I'm going to save those. Then I'll jump to that location and I'm going to unzip those. And there are my textures. I'm going to close that up for right now and close up the browser. And then down here in my content drawer, in my content level right here, I'm going to add a new folder, right click and go to new folder. And I'm going to label this materials, jump into that folder. And I'm going to add one more folder for the floor. And I'll bring in those assets, import them real quick. Once I've navigated to the location, I'm going to select those three and open them up. And that import is done. One more piece that I'm going to use for the floor is this center court line and circle right here. I created this in After Effects, just went in there, started a new composition at 2048 by 2048, and then used a black solid as the base for this, and then created a shape layer for the line and the shape layer for the circle. I saved this out as a JPEG and also imported that into Unreal Engine. So I'm going to navigate to that and bring that in also. So now I'm going to start on creating that texture. I'm going to make sure that that floor is selected, the rectangle right there. And while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and label that floor. And down here in the details, I'll drop down here to the material type, simple, click on that and go to Material Designer. And we'll start working with a PBR. Click continue on that. And we're going to jump into the base color to create most of this. I'm going to need 2 layers for this. So I'll go ahead and add another layer in real quick. I'm going to click the plus button and I'm going to add a solid color on this one. For this bottom layer right here under the texture, that's where we're going to add in our diffuse from the wood floor. So with it selected, we'll drop down here to our drop-down menu and search for that, wood. And there's our wood floor diffuse 4K right there. That's what we want. We'll click on it. It adds that in. We're not seeing anything right now because this layer is on top and it's just a black color. So it is overriding this bottom layer. I'm going to select this color here and change it to white. I'm going to hit OK on that. And we're going to add in the center court decal for the floor right here in this base layer mask. We'll select it and drop down here to our texture, and we'll search for that. And there's my center court texture. I'm going to select it. And what it's doing is it is using the black and white values to set up transparency. The black values are going to be the areas that we do not see of this white color. And then the white values are going to be the areas that we do see of this white color. So it's like a cookie cutter, cutting this white into this color right here and laying it on top of this floor texture right here. I am going to blend this into the floor using a blend mode. So right here on the blend modes, I'm going to drop to it and go down to overlay. After it builds the shaders, you'll see now how it is blending into that floor. That's just my preference. You can play with those blending modes or you can go without it. I'm going to make one more adjustment in here. The floor and the tiling of this, when we get back into, and I'll move this to the side real quick. I want these boards to be smaller, so I'm going to change the tiling on this. So select the wood texture there, and we'll drop down to tiling. And right here, I'm going to set both of those to 9. Move this out of the way real quick, and you'll see now we have many more of those boards showing up, and that looks a little bit more like a real basketball floor. I have a few more textures to add into this. The first one will be roughness. I'm going to select its channel. It's a texture, so all we need to do now is search for that. And I want that roughness right there. And then we'll go to the normal channel and we'll drop in, make sure that's selected, and we'll drop in that normal there for that wood floor. I do need to adjust the UVs for this one also so that they match up. So I'm going to set that tiling to 9 here. And then I also need to go back into the roughness, make sure that one's selected, and set the tiling to 9 also. Then back in our channels, I'm going to make an adjustment to the normal map, and I'm going to set that to 10. We need to save this material, so up here in the right-hand corner, I'm going to click on the drop-down menu, go to Export Material Designer Material, and I'll go back to my Materials folder there, and we're going to label this one MD_wood floor, and hit save on that. Once it's created the shaders, I'll close this out. I want to make sure that we have that specific material applied. So back down here in material type, material designer right there, I'm going to click on that and select asset. And then I'm going to search for it, MD_wood floor right there, and make sure that that one is applied. That way, if we come back to it later and make changes and we save them, it will update that material and not another material. The next part that I want to create are the bleachers, or what kind of appears to be the bleachers in the background here. To create this is a simple cube with a cloner. So I'm going to go over here to our 3D shapes, click on there and double click on the cube. We've dropped our first cube in there. I'll make some changes to this. I'm going to leave the mesh size at 100, but I'm going to change the bevel size here to 8 to round this a good bit. Once we've made those adjustments, let's go into and we'll build the material for this. Down here in material, we'll click on simple and we'll do material designer. I'm going to go with this PBR right here and hit continue. I'm going to go into the base color and we're going to change this from a texture. Click right here and we want to go to a linear gradient. Let me zoom out on this so we can see it a little bit better. You'll see the gradient going from black to white. We're going to make some adjustments to this. First thing we want to do is change the tiling from no tile to we want to tile. And then we're going to change the color, this white color. We're going to leave black as is, and we're going to change the white color here to this hexadecimal, 4168FFFF. And you can choose whatever color you want to there. That was just the design I went with. And then down here in our UV mapping here, we're going to change this rotation. We'll set that to a -90 degrees. And then I'm going to make sure that this is unlocked, and I'm going to set our tiling right here on the X to 3. And we want to save this material. So up here in the upper right-hand corner, Export Material Designer Material. And let me make sure I'm in my materials right there. MD_bleachers, BLEECHERS. And save that. We can close this out. We want to make sure the correct material is applied to it. So back here in our material type, let's select that, go to Asset, and then we'll search for that MD_Bleachers and make sure that it is applied. That way, if we make any changes to it and we update it, it will be the correct material. All right, we're going to clone this now to make our rows of bleachers and to create the circular shape they're in. So we'll go back over here, and in our motion design tools, we'll drop down to actors and we'll go to cloner actor, double click on it. And then in the cloner, in the material design outliner, we're going to select it, open it up, and delete that default clone. And the cube that we just created, we'll drop that into the cloner. We're going to make some changes to the cloner, so make sure it's selected in our details panel down here. And we'll drop down into the details, go to layout and grid right there. We're going to change that from grid to cylinder. Base count right there, we'll set that to 35. And on the height count, we'll set that to 4. The height there is the height that the cylinder creates with the different rows that we've added in. And so there's 4 right there. So I'm going to set this to 280. Let's open up that radius to 1020. After radius right there, we're going to set the angle start to a -0.3. That is shifting these around, and this will make a little bit more sense once we kind of complete all of the steps on this. And then the angle ratio right here, we're going to set that to 0.65. And we have a few more adjustments we need to make. There are these options down here, range and step. We're not going to worry about range, but we do want to go into step and make some adjustments with this. So enable that, and we're going to make some changes here on this. On the position, let's set this first one to 2.25. That pushes the layers away from us in this step pattern. And I'll set that to 2.25 and 0, and then this last one to 1.5. And adjust our Z position so that we bring those on up to be level with the floor. The next piece I want to build is our center court text here in the middle. And so we'll start off with a text actor. Over here in our motion design tool, actors, we'll double click on text actor. Definitely make some changes to that. Let's make sure it's selected, and we'll drop down into the details. I'm going to change the font from Roboto to Impact. We'll type in our text, center, and we're going to hit Shift, Enter right there to get that second line, and then court. And then I'm going to enforce uppercase right there. I have a few more changes to make. I want to align this center, and we'll make some changes on our line spacing right there. I'm going to set that to a -22. And down in our geometry, I'm going to extrude this to 30 and set our bevel to 1.5. And we'll leave everything else right there as is. And one more quick adjustment. We'll jump back up here to scale and set all of that. Make sure you're locked right there to 2. And bring this up just a little bit so it's on top of the floor. So now let's create the material for this text. I'm going to drop down here into materials. I'm going to go past the style there because we are going to create 2 materials for this. One for most of the body of it and then one for the bevel. So I'm going to start right here on the front material and create with Material Designer. PBR, continue. In the base channel, I'm going to select it and change this from texture to a solid color. And we'll change that color on the hex linear there to FF4900FF. We'll hit OK on that. And in the original material, it has a bumpy look to it. It has a texture to it. And I built that in using a normal map. Now that normal map, I chose to create it myself. In After Effects, I set up a new composition 2048 by 2048. And then I added in a white solid for the base of it. And then a shape layer with a repeater on it, repeating these little black circles. I also added a blur to it so that they would blend in a little bit. I saved this out as a JPEG, and this is considered a height map. And with that height map created, I went to this website here, Normal Map Online. Right here in the normal map, I can click on that and I can add in that height map. And it begins to create a normal map for me. I'm going to go with the default settings here, and then I'm going to download this. Now we need to import the normal map into Unreal Engine. In our materials folder, I'm going to right click and go up to import and navigate to that normal map. I'm going to select that one right there, brings that in, and Unreal sees that it's a normal map and converts it. I'm going to hit OK there. Now that normal map is ready for us to add to the material. Back in our material designer, I'm going to go to the normals channel right there and make sure that's selected, and we'll search for that normal map. I'm going to select it and add it in. You can see now that it is creating a bumpy look, a texture there for our material. I'm going to make a change to the tiling right here, and with that locked, I'm going to set both of these to 0.75. In the description of this tutorial, I'll make sure that that normal map is available and also this image here for you to download. I want to make a couple more adjustments in roughness and metallic. Like I've done before, I'm going to set this texture to just a white texture and do the same with metallic. And we'll make some adjustments in the channels here. On the roughness, I'm going to drop this down to 0.2. And on metallic, I'm going to set this down to 0.3. And then on our normals, I'm going to bring that up to 5. Let's save this out. I'm going to click on Export Material Designer right there and save this as Center Court Text. I'll close this out and make sure that I apply it now to the front, the extrude, and the back. I'll actually jump over here in the content drawer, make sure that material is selected. I'll save it while I'm there, but make sure it's selected. Jump out of the content drawer, and I'll click this button right here for those 3 material slots to add that in. For our bevel, I'm going to create another material. So right there on the bevel material slot, I'm going to hit Create with Material Designer. Again, PBR, Continue. I'll go into the base color, and I'm just going to change this to a solid color, change that to white. Hit OK on that, and do the same for the roughness and the texture. We'll just change these to the white texture. Between the roughness and metallic, that is the way we get our metal look. Now in the channels here, I'm going to set the roughness to 0.1, and we'll leave everything else as it is. Let's make sure we save this, export material, and I'll just save this as silver. And click Save on that. Close that out. And it is showing up, but I want to make sure that it is that material right there. So again, I'm going to go down to my drop-down menu and search for that and make sure it's selected. So we've created our center court text with the 2 materials. Now, one thing that I still am finding is an issue. If we close this project out, open it back up, sometimes these materials are no longer applied. The only way that I have found so far to make sure that these 4 materials stay in place is to go in and make sure that they have a keyframe set in the sequencer. So I'm just going to go through all 4 materials and select those and add that keyframe in for each of them. It's right there at the beginning of the sequence, and we can close that up. And if this ever gets to be an issue where there's too much going on in your sequencer and you want to hide that, you can select it and click this button right there and it will hide it. You can always bring those tracks back by selecting this button right here. Now would be a good time to save. Control-Shift-S. The next thing we will build are the stadium lights, the multi-lights up in the upper corners. For this, we'll start off with an ellipse. So in our motion design tools, 2D shapes right there, let's just double click on the ellipse. We'll add that in. Of course, we're going to make a bunch of adjustments to this. With it selected, we'll go into the operator stack. We're going to add a modifier to it, and that will be the pattern modifier right there. This is similar to a cloner. It just works as a modifier. Not quite as powerful, but still will get the job done for this. I'm going to bring down my details right there on layout. We're going to change that to grid and jump into our grid layout options right here. I'm going to leave that plain on YZ. In the repeat count right here, I'm going to bring the X up to 7 and jump over to the Y, set that to 3. And the spacing on this, I'm going to set both of them to 5. I'm going to add another modifier to this just to give it a little bit of depth. Go to our modifiers and extrude this. I'm going to bring the extrude way down. We don't need it quite that deep. I'm going to bring it down to 2 and add one more modifier to it, the bevel, and going to crank that up to as high as it'll go. just around these edges a little bit. I want an object to kind of add in as a back to all of these. So I'm going to add a rectangle in and make a few modifications. Go back over here to our 2D shapes, double click on the rectangle. That'll be in our motion design outliner. Make sure that it is selected. We'll make some adjustments to this. I'm going to drop down the mesh size and I'm going to set that to 775 by 340. You may need to make sure that that was set to free right there. And I'm going to set that bevel size to 40 right there. And then back up in our location, I'm going to push this back a little bit. So I'm going to set that Y location to 5. And you'll see now that our lights are in front and this back panel is behind them. I'm going to go ahead and make the material for this back panel. So I'll drop back down here to our material type, change that from simple to material designer, go in there, PBR, continue into the base channel right here. I'm going to set this first layer to a solid color and we'll change that color to, and I have the hexadecimal here. It is 2E, 2E, 2EFF. Hit OK on that. And I'm going to add in another layer on top of this. So we'll go here to the plus button, select texture. Let me bring this down a little bit. And in this layer right here, make sure that that texture is selected and we're going to change that to T Perlin noise. So if you'll look for T underscore Perlin, we want this noise M right here. We'll add that in. I'm going to add an effect to this with it selected. We'll click the effects button right there and I'm going to go to color and color correction. And I'm going to adjust the brightness and contrast on this. I'm going to set brightness to 0.63 and the contrast to 0.21. I do want this to be a metallic material, so I'm going to go in and set up my roughness and metallic. Again, select those materials and I'm just going to put in that white material, that white texture there on both of those. And now we can make our final adjustments in the channels. I'm going to set the roughness there to 0.1. Let's save this. I'll export this out and I'm going to label this as sign back material and hit save on that. Close that out. And again, I want to make sure that that material is added to this object. And so I'll go to asset there, select it and MD underscore. And we'll look for that sign back material right there and make sure that it is the material that is applied. And now we can make the material for our lights. I'm just going to select any one of those, make sure that that ellipse is selected. And then in our materials here, I'm going to go to material type right there, click on simple, just like we've been doing. Go into the material designer. This one is going to be emissive. Hit continue. Go into the emissive channel. I'm going to change this from a texture to a solid color, and then we'll change that color right there to white. We can hit OK on that. If you want your lights to be either a cooler or a warmer light, you can change that either to kind of a yellow or blue there, whatever color you want these lights to be. I'm going to stick with the white right there. Hit OK. And then I'll drop down into the channels, and this is where we're going to increase the strength of this emissive color. I'm going to bring that up to 7. Let's save that up here to export, and we'll just call that white emissive. To take a look at how this is working so far, I'm going to go up here and in our default scene right there, I'm going to open that up. And we have 2 objects that are lighting the scene now, as well as our new emissive lights that we've added in. I'm going to turn those off for right now, just so we can get a look at only the emissive lights. These are not real clean lights, but they can still be used, and we'll use them in this scene. They won't be the main portion of our lighting, but they'll still be giving off some light. I'm going to turn those back on and make one more change to our ellipse and rectangle right here. I want these 2 objects together. So I'm going to select both of them and go up here to the null, click on the null object right there. That wraps those 2 into this null. And I'm going to label this as multi-lights. And I'll do _1 because we're going to have 2 of these. And of course, for our second set of multi-lights, all we have to do now is just select the first one and duplicate it, Control D. So once that compiles shaders and duplicates it, we have two instances of this. We want to position the lights, but before I do that, I do want to change the size of both of them. I'm going to go to scale on both of them and set that to 0.3, and go to my second set right there and set that to 0.3. And now we'll make some adjustments on the location for our multi-lights. One, I'll set it over here in this left area. And so location there, we'll set that to 200, tab over to a -412, and then 300. We'll make some adjustments on rotation. On the y-axis right there, we'll set that to 42. And on the z-axis, we'll set that to a -42. So that rotates the light pointing in towards the center court. And now we'll go over to our multi-lights 2, and very similar to this, we'll set this to 200, tab over, and we'll set that at 412. And then we'll bring that up to 300, and we'll rotate also very similarly to 42 by 42 on the Y and the Z axis there. And that has those lights pointing in towards the center court. I want to take a look real quick just to see how these are lighting the scene. So I'll jump into the default scene there and shut off our directional light. You can see that we're not getting much from them, but what I do want to accomplish with them is in just a few moments, we're going to take a look at the bloom, kind of the glow around these lights. And that's why we want them in there. I'm going to bring these back in, and we have some more lighting to do. I am going to get rid of this skylight and directional light in just a few minutes, so we won't be using these at all. But for right now, I'm going to leave them in, and I'm going to start adding in some rect lights. So over here in our motion design mode, I'm going to drop down to lights, and I'm going to double click on a rect light. You'll see this little X right there. All we need to do to get rid of that is jump into that light right there, and we'll change that to movable. We'll make some adjustments on this rect light. I'm going to add 3 of these in to light up the center court text. This will be our first one. And so location, I'm going to bring this closer to us. On the X axis, I'm going to set that to a -355, and then tab over. I'm going to leave the Y axis as is, and then I'm going to bring this up to 257 on the Z axis. I'm going to jump out of the camera to show you where we are on this and back up a little bit. And you'll see that light is up there. Let me swing around just so we can get a different perspective of our scene. And in our rotation on the Y-axis, I'm going to set that to a -20. So now we have that light pointing down at the center court text. And we'll make some adjustments to the light and its properties. Let me bring this up. We can see this a little better. On the intensity, I'm going to bring that up to 8,350. I'm going to leave the attenuation radius as is. Now, the thing about these rect lights is we can shape them on the X and Y axis or on their width and height. So I'm going to make this light much wider so that it encompasses the text. So we're going to bring that width up to 900. And you see it widen out. And then the height, I'll bring that up to 105. This light also has barn doors. Right here, you'll see these barn doors that will help shape the light. And so right now, the angle of those are set at 88 degrees. I'm going to bring them down to 0, and then I'm going to stretch those barn doors out a bit. I'm going to bring that up to 140. And so that is focusing that light to a bit more narrow throw right in this section of the text. So we can see that. I'm going to turn off the skylight and the directional light. And now you can see how this rect light is beginning to light up the text. I think I'll leave those off from here on out. I'll jump back into the camera. I'm going to add another rect light in. So up here, I'm going to double click on rect light. It's right there. Again, what we need to do is make sure that one is selected. So there's our rect light 2. I'm going to make it movable, and I'm going to bring it back to -355. And I'm going to set the height of this one at 77. And very similar to our other light, I'm going to set the intensity for this one at 8,350. We'll leave the attenuation radius as it is. And on these width and height, again, I'm going to set that to 900, this to 105. I'll bring this angle all the way up to 90. And that should be it for that second light. And now I'm going to add in a third rect light. Back over here, double click on rect light, and make sure it's selected in our motion design outliner, make it movable. And I'll go to my location properties here. Going to bring it back just like we did the others, negative 355. Going to drop this one down a bit. I'm going to set that to a negative 82 on its location there. On the rotation there, I'm going to angle that up to 20. And I'm going to bring my intensity down to 2500. And I'm going to open up the width there, the 350. I have one more light that I want to add in. It's going to light up our bleachers in the back a little bit, but it's also going to do a lot for generating the lens flares that are in the original design. Before I do that, I'm going to bring this center court text forward just a little bit. Let me go find it. And on the x-axis right there, I'm going to set that to a negative 70 on location. Bring it forward a little bit. Now let's add in that last light. It is simply a point light. I'm going to go over here to the lights and double click on that point light. It's already behind our text, but we're going to position it a little bit more farther away from us. Let's make sure that that light is selected. There's that point light. We'll make sure it's movable also. And on location, we're going to set that to 290 by 13.5 by 60.5. After location, I'm going to bring up the intensity to 6,000 on that. And everything else will leave the same. Now that we have all of the lighting built, there's one last thing that I'm going to look at, which has a big effect on these lights. I do want to create some bloom around these lights, and then we'll also create some lens flares. To accomplish this, we're going to go into the post-process volume that is already in here. I am going to go ahead and delete the skylight and the directional light there. And there's the post-process volume. This basically affects everything that goes on in the scene. For right now, I just want to drop down to this option here, Bloom. I'm going to open that up and we're basically going to check all of these boxes. You'll see already that it's starting to have an effect. We're already starting to get a bloom on these lights. I'm going to change the method here from standard to convolution. The intensity I'm going to bring up to 1.5, and that is definitely something you can work to your preference. And the convolution scatter here, I'm going to set that to 13.5. You can see between those two properties, we can adjust the amount of bloom that we have from the lighting. So if that's too much, not enough, you can work with these two right here. The intensity of the light also will have an effect on that. So there's kind of three ways that you can adjust these to kind of get the look that you might want. I'm going to go with this for right now. It's a little exaggerated. I do want to add in at least one camera animation. So I'm going to grab my camera here and bring it over and drop it into the sequencer. Always with the first camera that you drop in, you're going to have that camera cuts. Once that's in there, I need to unlock that camera so I can actually move it. So we'll click on the lock right there. And now just using the normal game controls on my keyboard, I'm going to slide this over a little bit, rotate it, maybe push in just a little bit, whatever kind of look you want. I'm just going to do a simple move from one side to the other and jump down here into my transform controls. And I'm going to set on that transform right there so that I get all of them. I'm just going to click that button right there to set that first keyframe. And I'll bring this up to about 120. So it's about around 4-second animation. And I'll slide this over to the other side, rotate it, and kind of set the shot over here, how I want it to end. And we'll set keyframes for all of that right there. Let's jump back now and take a look at that. I'm going to jump back to the beginning of that. I want to check my focus real quick just to make sure the camera is in focus. I'm going to go to focus settings there, and I'll click our debug plane right there and bring it in to make sure that's in focus. I'll set a keyframe there. So if I have to animate this and then bring it to our next set of keyframes, and that's probably staying completely in focus, but I'll push that back just a little bit and set that second keyframe there. That way I'll know that's in focus as we pull through. I'm going to jump to 120 right there. Close all of this up. I'll add in one more camera animation. I'm going to duplicate that camera right there. Select it, Control D, and bring that in to our sequencer. Drop it in. And so we have that second camera in there. I'm going to select it so that we are watching that camera, and I'll reposition it. I do need to move our keyframes here. So I'll slide this back and have it start right here. I'm going to open up all of our transform options right there and select these last keyframes and delete them. And now I can reposition the camera and set up the next camera move. I'll go kind of back to center here, maybe start up a little bit higher. And if I want to, I can zero that out to make sure I'm dead center and make sure my rotation is centered, and maybe angle that back down a little bit. In the transform controls right there, I'm going to make sure that I set that keyframe for all of them. And then on the focus distance right there, let me check it for that camera. I'll actually need to deactivate it in the first camera right there and go to my second camera and activate it there to make sure, okay, that looks good. Deactivate it real quick. I'll jump ahead and go to about 180, and I'll bring that camera down, rotate it a little bit, and set a keyframe on those properties. So we have our second animation. I do need to make a cut in our camera cuts here. So I'll bring that back to 120 and go to our camera cuts and select that second camera. So it will cut to that second camera right there. I am going to adjust these keyframes to linear, and we'll do that on the second set of keyframes. Now we can jump back, and I'll select our camera cuts this time and watch that through. And so there you can see that we have now bloom from those lights, and we have lens flares. All of that can be adjusted by the intensity of your lights, the location of your lights, and also the bloom in the post-process volume here. I hope this has been helpful. For more on Unreal Engine's motion design tools, check out my other tutorials and hit the like and subscribe button.